you so confident in what you have with this woman that if there's a circumstance, God forbid it, that you've now made a good decision from a masculine perspective, not from a familiar or family perspective?
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
There's no contingency plan. There doesn't need to be one. You know, my wife and I, we're not separating. That's not an option. We got married and it's to stay together. We have a son and that's to stay together. I never leave my son. I never ever abandon my son. And I'm not saying that that's, I'm going to use my son as the reason to stay with my wife if I feel that one day I don't want to be. That's not what I'm saying. But there doesn't need to be a contingency plan because that's not, there will be no abandonment, not from my wife, not for myself.
To give you a piece of my mind.
From Normal Bros, and we back at it again. First of all, I'm gonna need you to tell a friend and tell a friend and tell a mother effing friend to follow and subscribe to your boys. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and other podcast platforms as well. You can catch us on YouTube and TikTok. That's Far From Normal Podcast. Make sure you type that into a search engine and see the boys on those clips. We got everything for you. We got the website, www.farfromnormalpodcast.com. We got all the links up there. Make sure you check it out. Of course, YouTube. We're on Instagram as well. That's far_from_normal_podcast. Check it out. You already know. It's your boy Fuzzy Vision. You know, I see the world clear. And, you know, I see the future. And the future is bright. You already know. Fuzzy Vision with 2 N's. If you have any likes, dislikes, rebuttals, or you want to be on the podcast, hit your boy up. Sonny, drop the handle, baby.
You already know what it is. It's your boy Sonny Frames. You can catch me on the gram at Sonny, SONNY, Frames, double S at the end. Make sure when you do check out my Instagram page, check out my stories because I usually post a lot of stuff that has to do with motivation, inspiration, chasing your dream, and execution. So let's not forget, any dream that you're trying to achieve, the only way that you'll ever achieve it is through execution and putting a plan to motion. So make sure that you don't just stay in the dream world, and make sure you make it a reality.
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
And Fuzzy, let's get him. Masculinity. We got Roger back on, you know.
Let's get it.
And he had a very different dynamic than the usual, the standard person, which he's a stay-at-home dad. And we definitely wanted to get more into it. I don't think we got enough information with how that dynamic worked and how you even got into it and what made you take a backseat and say, you know what, I'm okay with, you know, being that stay-at-home dad, and I'll do whatever I can to help my family become the best family that they can be. How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, first of all, just thanks again for having me back.
Yeah, for sure.
It's good to be here again. So to answer your question specifically,
Mm-hmm.
I think sort of the way you framed your question, that sort of, I kind of have an issue with that in a sense.
Okay.
Like, I don't call it a backseat. You know what I'm saying? I call what I'm doing, it's also the front seat in the sense that, you know, what I do, I consider it to be, you know, no disrespect to my wife, but I consider it to be even harder than her job. The job that I'm doing in a sense of being the stay-at-home father, the responsibilities that come with that, I think is a lot more demanding than what my wife does. So, you know, to answer your question even in more detail, I think it came about more by circumstance, not in terms of let's sit down and let's talk. Okay, this is what you're going to do. This is what I'm going to do. It was more circumstance. Living in a city that's quite expensive, and being faced with rising costs, having to pay daycare. You know, since my wife was earning considerably more than myself. And I had been recently laid off. So it kind of just happened. And then we just decided to continue rolling with it. Sort of worked better financially. And so that was that.
Okay, so the reason why I said back seat is because it's just like in a car, right? We have the driver, we got the passengers, and then you got the people that sitting at the back seat, got people that sitting on the passenger side.
Sure.
So there's always only one driver, right? Or is there two drivers?
There can be more than one driver. There's 2 pilots to fly a plane.
But we're talking about a standard vehicle. We're talking about
Okay, but why does sort of what if you want to call it our family project or a household? Why does it have to be a standard vehicle? Why does it have to be a car instead of a plane? Why can't there be 2 pilots?
Because
This is going to be a car.
It's gonna be a car. Like that's what I'm saying. You tell me when you've met a car that had 2 drivers driving the same car at the same time.
I know cars that don't even need a driver. I know cars that can drive
Oh,
themselves.
I like that. Was a good counter.
That
And
was
You know
a
what I'm
good
saying?
counter.
So-
I'll say this.
That
I'll
was a
say,
good counter.
I'll say this much when it comes to even what you're talking about in terms of backseat and in terms of maybe this new type of family that you're creating where we can do whatever we want. Like if it works for us, let's do it how it works for us, because every family is different. No one has the same formula for success. But how are you, for your situation, how would you know that that's a scenario that would be successful? When did you come to the conclusion that this might be a successful way of conducting my life?
Sometimes when you're faced with difficult circumstances, it's not always, the best decision is not always what's going to be more successful. Sometimes it's just about stopping the bleeding. It's about what's going to be less catastrophic or what's going to be less difficult.
It's funny you said that. And also, you want to put the mic to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's funny you said that because I was gonna ask and say, is that how you're looking at it? Do you think that's successful?
Absolutely. Exactly. That's a good reflection in the sense that we're talking about living in, I don't have the stats, but one of the most expensive cities in North America, if not the
Toronto.
world.
Yeah.
It's a very expensive city.
Definitely.
If I wait to make more money than my wife makes, I'll be waiting a long time. I'm incredibly proud of my wife. She does very well. She earns a considerable amount of money doing what she does. So if ever we were going to decide that one parent would stay home, it's a no-brainer that would be me. Again, I think we did discuss this earlier, but I have ambitions as well. I don't plan to be a stay-at-home father, for the rest of my life. Sometimes I do get very anxious. I want to go back to work. I want to achieve certain things, for myself that I think I'm not achieving being a stay-at-home dad. And I think that sacrifice also has to be mentioned as well, because it is a sacrifice. I'm putting my career on hold to stay at home.
Speaking on that, because you mentioned that you're in therapy, and we didn't get to touch on that, right? I didn't get to understand when you said therapy. When did you get started? Who introduced you to that idea of, maybe you want to talk to a therapist if you're feeling anxious?
Why are you getting therapy?
Well, no, this is what we're talking about. No.
Yeah.
That's the point of the question.
You guys
That's
killing
the
me,
point.
man.
That's the point of the question. How you started. How long do you plan on continuing just going to therapy? Because there has to be a graduation date at some point. You know what I mean?
That's what they say. Yeah,
That's
there
what
has
they
to
say.
be a
You can't-
point. Therapy's not forever.
It's not forever.
It's
right?
meant for you to talk
not?
to people.
It's
No,
meant
it's not
for
meant
a
to be
certain
forever.
period of time, and then you graduate, and then you figure it out. Like
Okay.
the bird leaves the nest type.
No, that's what.
Not necessarily.
yeah,
that also that's open to interpretation as well.
Oh, okay.
The
So-
thing is, and what I'm going to say, it also ties a little bit into the sort of the situation of me being a stay-at-home dad and with my wife and stuff like that. I immigrated to Canada. I arrived in Canada when I was 20 years old, and I arrived in Toronto when I was 30 years old. And what I mean to say by that is that my wife is born and raised in Canada. I don't know that many immigrants that are very successful here in Canada. There are exceptions to the rule, but generally immigrants spend a lot of time catching up, or they end up doing jobs that, maybe the nationals, Canadians in this case, might not be willing to do. And what I'm trying to say with that is my wife was able to benefit from having a network growing up and live and studying in the same city. She developed a network and she was able to benefit from that, something which unfortunately I wasn't able to do, not to make any excuses. But again, how that ties into the therapy is, again, when I say I immigrated from here, I was born in Brazil. And culturally, it's very different. The idea of therapy in Brazil is something that's very, very common. Everybody has a therapist.
wow.
Everybody talks to a
So this is
therapist.
something new to me. I didn't know.
Yeah, it's very
Very
sort of
different,
different than in North America. The idea of having it, you tell people you're doing therapy here, they're like, "Why? What's wrong with you? What's going on? Oh,
Isn't that how
this
you
guy's got a
react?
problem."
Right?
Exactly.
Like,
Why are you doing
oh,
therapy?
yeah, what's this?
There, it kind of works in a very different way. Therapy is in some ways, sometimes they're almost like a life coach. They help you organize your life in certain ways. They help you see things you might not be seeing. They help you also deal with certain things, like if you are experiencing anxiety or depression, that kind of stuff. But culturally, it's very different than the idea of therapy here in North America.
Mhm.
You gotta. No, I don't like this. You gotta tell me more. Why are you in therapy? That's because the way I'm listening to it, you kind of said a bit of it. You're in
Mhm.
therapy because there was a shock here that you didn't anticipate receiving as a man when you came into the job market, into the labor market.
No, not necessarily. That is true. There was a shock, but that's not the reason I started doing.
So
doing
what
therapy.
is the? So are you saying that the reason you did it is because you were in Brazil and it's like a cultural thing over there, so you just kept on with it? What was the? I'm trying to figure out what made, because there are people that'll be around me being like, "Hey, Hassan, go to therapy." It's like, oh, I know I'll go to therapy. So why did you go to therapy? Like,
You know,
what is the catalyst?
To tell you the truth, I can't remember the specific catalyst, but it could be a variety of reasons. Could sometimes, even being an immigrant here, sometimes you're lonely. You might be having mental health issues. I can't specifically remember what was the moment I said, "Oh my God, I need to talk to a therapist." So I can't say specifically it was mental health or anything like that. But that there's just a range of possibilities.
Yeah, and you were with your wife prior to you guys being married. How long were you guys together for?
About 7 years.
7
We've
years.
been
So it
together.
kind of doesn't necessarily
married for 3 years.
because you've had a
Because he had a wife?
no, you had a woman for a certain period of time, but then
You
again,
could be lonely.
You could
from
be lonely
family.
you can
even when
still
you-
be lonely from family.
Yeah,
True.
yeah.
You can even be around family, still be
In
In
lonely.
fact-
fact, that's
yeah.
what I was kind of even
So some
alluding to, where it's like, because I have a view I wanted to speak to, right? Last time I didn't get a chance to speak to you. So I wanted to kind of like break into more of the things that's making you, let me describe it this way. There's something jarring with the stay-at-home position that I have, or that you have, that I like, and I'm saying that to say, I think for me, as someone who collects data and just tries to research and see patterns, it strikes me that a lot of men are going in that kind of route. But the reason behind it is because the system is abandoning their growth. So when you spoke about the labor market, I heard you just talk about how you, again, correct you right here, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but how those same opportunities weren't necessarily allotted to you. And then behind it, you said you don't want to make excuses. So to me, when I heard that, I wasn't thinking you're making excuses. I'm thinking you're touching on the tip of the iceberg, that there is an infrastructure and there's a greater iceberg underneath the level we see it as, that I kind of want to venture into. And from what I'm understanding is, men are not feeling, you use that term of you have an ambition, and I respect that because every man should have ambition, but there's something that's making them check out of society. You are just fortunate in a different way to check out of society in a sense, because you have the stability that comes with your family dynamic from this particular woman's job. So it kind of, you kind of see what I'm saying? Like
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I
Right.
understand what you're saying. I've listened to other podcasts. I've listened to interviews of, men, not just men, but also women who have become the stay-at-home parent, and some of them compare it to a social death, in a sense, kind of what you're saying about checking out. And that's why a lot of people feel lonely, because they feel they're not actively participating in society.
This is why when he was talking about the driver's seat, and obviously you can correct me, the way I'm looking at it is, is it a masculine position to not be the driver in the driver's seat? That's what I felt like when he was talking about a car. That's what he was trying to bring. And if not, that's what I'm bringing. How is that? I kind of asked, like, do you not see the corrosion that might do in terms of, you see how you're saying you're taking a back seat for your career? Are you so certain with all respect, are you so certain that the situation you have with your woman is grounded outside of public and social influences, that there won't be an abandonment coming from a field you didn't anticipate, such as from your woman, to leave you in a place where now not only are you dealing with the things you're dealing with, but now, I mean, again, I'm for marriage, so I'm not even trying to call any of this nonsense into existence. I'm just saying, what is your contingency plan when you're in a position like that? Because most men will hear this, and I'm not speaking from just most men to hide behind it. When I hear stuff like that, I look at it like, okay, I know why this individual's doing it, but are you so confident in what you have with this woman that if there's a circumstance, God forbid it, that you've now made a good decision from a masculine perspective, not from a familiar or family perspective?
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, it might sound naive. It might sound a little bit naive to you guys, but there's no contingency plan. There doesn't need to be one. You know, my wife and I, we're not separating. That's not an option. We got married and it's to stay together. We have a son, and that's to stay together. I never leave my son. I never ever abandon my son. And I'm not saying that I'm going to use my son as the reason to stay with my wife if I feel that one day I don't want to be. That's not what I'm saying. But there doesn't need to be a contingency plan, because there will be no abandonment, not from my wife, not from myself.
What's this thing this confidence, because I wouldn't call it naivety. So what's this confidence that you have? What is this tenet of confidence that she's bringing that strikes? Because when I hear that, not many women are bringing this. Women are going to listen to this, and the point is to keep it real, right? They're going to listen to this and say, "This is some crazy shit you say." You know what I'm saying? They're going to listen.
Some Kool-Aid,
right? In the sense that men, because this is the truth about the circumstance, men will look at this and be like, that nigga sounds wild. And then women will look at this, like I saw from my interpretation of that other woman that you spoke to last time, kind of like, this nigga's bugging. Like, why aren't you doing what men should be doing? She didn't say that, but I don't know if you felt that.
Yeah,
with her
she
questioning.
was thinking that,
but she didn't say it.
Was
yeah,
trying to hold back.
You know,
Exactly.
women aren't confrontational like that. So, you know, they
not that
gotta
I'm trying to be confrontational. I'm just trying to have some real dissecting of your position.
Absolutely.
Right.
No, I mean, every relationship, marriage, and whatever is subject to, you know, it could end.
Exactly.
We all know that. I mean, I can't say 100%.
But you're definitely at a 90% with your confidence.
Yeah.
So what is that? How can I want to?
Well, there's many factors involved. There's factors that I could name. There's factors that I don't even know, but perhaps they give me a certain confidence. One thing I can say for sure is that my wife is very religious, and she leans on her faith a lot.
What faith is this?
She's Christian.
Okay.
And so based on that almost exclusively, I know that, you know, as long as, you know, there are certain checks that need to be hit in terms of fidelity and so on and so forth, but there's going to be no abandonment, and that's one reason.
I have a question. In terms of that, because of course we know that with marriage there's divorce always on the horizon. Not everyone chooses to think about it. That's fine. You can believe that your marriage is going to last forever until you're dead and gone, and that's how it's going to go. But in the case that things go south, so put it in a woman's perspective, right? In this day and age, if a woman decides not to have a career and be a stay-at-home mother, it's a risk she's taking. Of course, she knows this, and she knows that potentially, and I think this is the rhetoric kind of going around where a lot of women want to be independent now, or want to be able to be self-sufficient at the very least, because it's the idea of being under this control of this man, especially financially. Because you have to think about even like immigrants and even, you know, women of this country, a lot of the times they might not be granted the opportunity to work because they're childbearing, right? They're, you know, especially if a guy wants multiple children, if you're talking about 3+, right? 3, 4, 5. So they're not going to have the opportunity. And of course, on the woman's side, she might not be of course she's going to go in there and say to herself, well, if this doesn't work out, like, I still, like, the law works more in the favor of a woman than it does for a man in this instance, especially if the relationship dissolves, right? So for men, for example, say they're in your position and they were contemplating of whether they wanted to be a stay-at-home or wanted to be making less than their wife, say, for example, in a marriage. what advice would you give to those type of men? Or is this something that you just believe works for your situation? Is this a lifestyle that you would maybe promote or say to other people?
Is this a lifestyle
Is
you
this something
promote?
you would recommend to other men and say, hey, look, there's other options. You don't need to necessarily go to work. It's just as fulfilling as being a stay-at-home dad. Hey man, spotlight's on you, brother.
Listen,
No,
these are the questions you gotta answer.
It's a good
perplexed.
question. I'm just
Yeah.
laughing because I can't say what works for everybody else. You know what I'm saying? I can't say what's fulfilling to you and what's fulfilling to me. Some people are fulfilled by money. Some people are fulfilled by money. So I can't specifically speak to what's going to fulfill somebody else. What I can say 100% is that if you want to get close to your child in a way that most fathers, most men don't get a chance to, then I would definitely recommend it. Because I've made a bond with my son that I think I never would have been able to make if I wasn't able to be a stay-at-home father the way I have been for like the last 2 years.
Your situation when you're saying that's why, again, I don't want to be the devil's advocate or anything. I'm speaking really from my heart when I'm hearing this. You have a one-off situation, sir. That's what you have right now when you're describing that. And the foundation of what you brought up has to deal with your woman's religious value and underpinning.
Sure.
Most women are not, they're not doing that. They're not religious to that degree that they're going to tolerate a man staying at home for majority of the time while they are, quote, bringing home the bacon.
Sure, but that's why I say this is just different beliefs, because even, what does that mean, tolerate? That sort of implies as if what I'm doing is negative or I'm not carrying my weight in any way.
It would, I would say.
But perception, I think perception is big on this in the sense of what you're saying makes sense in your case when you start thinking of it. And like for you to say what makes it this and what makes it that, that's a valid question you're asking. But of course, she has her own family. You have your own family. Everyone has opinions as well. And whether their opinion works with, what you're doing or not, they're still going to have that opinion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And why? Because the traditional aspects of marriage and the aspects of what the man is supposed to do and what the woman's supposed to do. So for yourself, did you have to deal with that with family members? Did you have to deal with that with friends? Just because they might have a different scenario, did you have to explain it to them? Were people curious to know about that, or people don't really have much to say about, that fact of your life?
I'd say it's mixed. I would say, amongst like my own circle of friends or family, not that many people were either surprised or shocked or anything, or it didn't need much explaining. I think I always get a curious reaction from people when sort of either I'm working, I work 2 nights a week. I usually get a curious reaction from people when they ask what I do for a living, and I say, "Oh, I'm a stay-at-home father." So I find generally, that's when it needs to be explained. But within my own circle, not so much.
Why do you say that? Why do you say when someone asks you what you do? Why do you say that you're a stay-at-home father? And as an alternative, why don't you say, "I take care of my family"? Why is
I think
don't that bring a shock?
I think it's also just a cultural thing, because I think that's the most common term that people use is I'm a stay-at-home father, I'm a stay-at-home parent. That's why I don't say specifically, I'm taking care of my family. I think people, when they ask that question, they're looking for a title. And the specific title for that generally is a stay-at-home father.
But I think the shock value, I think what Jariah is trying to say is there wouldn't be such a shock value if you just said, "I'm taking care of my family."
Or apprehension, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but I mean, that's not that specific, in a sense that
but
people
why do you need to be specific.
No, that's
because they're asking what I do for a living. If I say I'm taking care of my family, that's not what they're looking for. They're asking for my profession. If I say I'm taking care of my family, they could be like, well, what does that mean specifically?
But you see,
what do you mean you're taking care of your family?
Then if let's say I was doing what you're doing, and someone asked me that, I would say, "I'm taking care of my family," and they'll say, "I'm looking for a profession," and I'll say, "Well, this isn't a profession. This is the calling. This is what I'm onto. I don't have a profession that will suit your taste right now, or that will suit what you're looking for." Because what I'm saying is like, that there is a reaction that people get when you say you're a stay-at-home father, because that's not a profession.
Sure.
So even if you tell them that's not a profession, they're going to say, "What? That sounds like," some might look at it like that's like a person that's like degenerate, leeching,
Yes, that is
With all
absolutely
respect,
right.
like
With all due respect,
as I
that's
sit and I
what may
analyze you
come
and I
up.
watch you,
Mhm.
I see your intention. So you, to me, I think it works for you,
Mhm.
and I think I see what you're onto. I watch. I'm like, okay, this is really just a one-off situation.
Yeah, no, it's
No,
not.
Because
no,
others,
it's not,
they
though.
can't implement this.
It's
There's
not
something-
though,
look at
but
this boy.
look,
He's-
but the
I
thing
see
is,
like a
another
decent
guy that's
con-
also
if
a
you-
stay-at-home father,
okay.
Like
but
this?
it's but
Go
it's,
ahead,
no,
go
but it's
ahead.
more recent. It's more recent. It was in a situation where he was making he was the breadwinner at a point in time,
Mhm.
and then due to the fact that they moved, so
Okay.
that's why that's why his wife took the role of now being the breadwinner, because she got an opportunity elsewhere, and now he has to look for his own opportunity within the country that he's in now.
Mhm.
So it just the dynamic switched in that sense.
Would you be a stay-at-home pops? That's what I'm saying too. That would you be a stay-at-home father if you were offered a 2.7 million contract a year? You wouldn't stay at home.
No, of course not.
So that's why I'm trying to say that there's a financial imperative here. That to me, the primary reason as to why you stay at home has to deal with the lack of opportunities that was presented to, as I see you, as an able-bodied man that might even be successful if these, dare I say, fuckers of society don't impede on
Mhm.
perhaps, because that's what he's describing when I
that's what he
first
said.
heard when he said he
Yeah,
came
but
here, that
you're
immigrant
right.
kind of
Yeah.
layer, what I'm
It's
hearing
the
him, right?
financial, yeah, that's the
Right?
biggest factor when
Which-
it comes to
Mhm.
dealing with the family. for
And
sure.
the thing that I want to speak on the woman element, because no women are here right now. If they hear this, or when they hear this, it comes across as someone that isn't ambitious. As I'm right beside you, you look and listen. If I had an issue, I'll say you look like you are an ambitious man.
Mhm.
So I'm seeing that the formula you have with your wife, I might even say might be a blessing. That's why I keep saying it's one off. Whereas some other males, I might even say that there's some men that are factoring in, and like I know some niggas that I know that they'll be doing this, but they're not doing it because of righteousness
Yeah.
or because
Yes,
their woman is
absolutely,
religious.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
They're doing this
absolutely.
because such as some of the women that might be hearing, it's like you almost want to call them a bum,
Mhm.
which this is
Sure.
not what I'm saying you are,
Yes,
right? Because
that-
there's a
that is-
distinction.
you're right. There is
right?
a distinction, and
Yes.
I think Jariah got it right there, because
Mhm.
there is a distinction, and maybe that's what needs to be cleared. Because for your perspective, when you're describing it, and when we look at you and we see, your mannerism, how you present
It's more
yourself, and
pure
everything
Exactly.
like that, we can
Exactly.
tell that this is something that is working, not
It's not a
something
scheme.
that is
Yeah.
No,
It's
no,
not a
definitely
this is
not.
something that's like, oh yeah, like she's taking care of me. I'm looking kind of raggedy. No haircut, no nothing, and I'm just kind of living off her dollar, right? So,
Yeah.
but there are those type of men, and that's why
Absolutely.
when he's talking about the degeneracy of it and people thinking leechy, because we've always heard of these stories. How much times have we heard of, like,
From a woman too.
Yeah, yeah.
From a woman saying that
yeah.
man was eating off of me,
Eating
and
off of
he didn't have
her,
a gig, and all these
women
type of
paying
things.
certain guys' bills. Actually, I had a situation which is hilarious, a funny example. I was getting a braid up, right? So I ended up getting a braid up by this woman, and she had a situation similar, not similar to your situation, but it's like a baby father type of scenario where they
Mhm.
had a kid together, and he had a job that was paying good, and he had his own place when they first met, before they had a child. So he was set up and he was good. So now they conceive this, or she ends up getting pregnant, and now they're about to have the child, or they have this child. Then something happened with the guy where he got in trouble with the law and pretty much lost his opportunity of work, right? So that's there now. And so she's seen him as like pretty ambitious and whatnot. Now she came, then she had to change all her plans. She moved from where she was to where he was at. And pretty much the guy ended up just being, a leech. Like, he ended up just taking from her rather than supporting her, which
Sure.
was the original promise.
Yeah.
And then after she was describing the guy to me, and he's a guy that takes care of his kid, but she would describe him as a bum or as a leech, right? So that's the misconception that you're gonna get with a stay-at-home father. It depends if it's something that's arranged or
Sure.
if it's something that is a mistake, right?
Mhm.
So that's the differentiation I think that needs to be said, especially when we're describing it with you. I think there's there's a difference between men that, you know, have their own dreams, like you said, have their own ambitions, not planning to do this, you know, for the rest of their life. But of course, your child is young, so you want to be there at the earlier stages to help cultivate the culture. And I think that's the difference that we have to, I want to just bring up, just because he is right. I mean, there is going to be that perception of, you know, like, okay, when are you going to get back on that horse? Like, okay,
and
you stay at home for 1 year, but like how much years, you know?
And your flavor is kind of different because you have such a positive poise about it, right? So it kind of looks like Lucky Charms, where it's like, hey, you guys should try this too. Like, right? He's so happy-go-lucky. So it's like, so people look at that saying.
But maybe it's the fact that we never even seen it before, right? Because we hear it from a woman's point of view, but we never hear it from a male's point of view, because they usually have negative connotations to the fact that a man is staying home. Oh, he's a bum. He's this, he's that. But we never seen it from the male's point of view.
But the male's point of view doesn't really matter, though. Because...
How so?
Which is not no disrespect to you. Because that's why I keep saying, Roger, this is an anomaly. This thing we're hearing is an anomaly. So when I say the things I'm saying, it is no shots or any jabs to you. That's why I said, like, that religious thing that he was talking about with his wife, it looks to me, if I was to render, someone says, can you describe this? I'll say, here's a man that recently came into the country, or whatever have you, or he's been here for 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is. He's going through a time right now. And in marriages, that's not our business, right? So in marriages, because they're together through thick and thin and rough patches, if he's the type of person that has a garage where he's an engineer and he's working on something, that's not my business as a man. But because it seems to me that he's proud of what he might be getting to and working on to, and he's also really, don't you hear it in his voice, encouraged by his growth of his family, and he loves his family, which every man that's married should. You see, it merges so well, and it's like fine wine. And how is he sounds so optimistic about that position? Because I'll say naturally, that's not an optimistic position, because that's even a trap position. If he doesn't have a good wife, and if it's not Christian or spiritual to the capacity that he's describing, that woman is plotting on when to leave. 100%. We know in regular situations with dating, if the man doesn't even make six figures, you didn't even give the chance. Right?
But I think so. I think, like, sorry to cut you off.
No problem.
I think there are some things there that make sense, but also I think it's a cultural thing as well. Like, we were talking a little bit earlier, and I said that, I've kind of taken a step back from, some of the things I perceive as being a little bit sort of not aligned with my belief system. I mentioned I was born in Brazil. And I grew up living in many different countries. I was born in Brazil. I lived for a while in Nigeria. I lived for a while in the UK. And I spent most of my childhood in a place called Bahrain, which is in the Middle East. So I was exposed to a lot of different things, a lot of different models of society, so on and so forth. And you guys look a little bit at my situation and you say it's an anomaly, and in some ways it is. I think the way it works might be a little bit different, but what I'm doing is nothing new, in a sense, being a stay-at-home father. It's not as common perhaps in North America, but it's something that it's quite common, in Europe, more so than in North America. So I think.
So how many friends do you have currently?
None, just myself in this situation. No, but that's exactly. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm saying it's also a cultural thing.
How is it a cultural thing?
Well, because like I said, in Europe, it's quite different.
But in Europe, it's because there's a welfare state that continues to subsidize a lot of these men that don't go to work. That's something I've read onto and see.
Not to my knowledge.
These men, I'm trying to, exactly. It seems like your knowledge that you're espousing, that's why I keep saying it's really one-off. Like, it's really special. And I don't say that any derogatory kind of thing as I'm listening to this. In UK, in the reason why people value the European ways of being these days is because there's oftentimes, wow, out of a 7-day week, I can get 4 days off. There's a lot of lofty things that the males that are grown up in that culture these days are either embedded in it, just like how if a person didn't have a father and he grows up in a certain street neighborhood, he's embedded in it, but that doesn't make it a right thing. From what I'm kind of understanding, because you mentioned Bahrain, you mentioned Nigeria, you mentioned Brazil. Again, maybe because of my economic background, I when you say these things, I see what I remember learning about them and knowing. If you bring it to the Nigerian context, there are certain communities, depending on which tribe and things and village, whatever have you, where these men do stay at home.
Mhm.
And if you were referencing that, to me, what I would say is the nuanced difference there is that they have money. They have the influence and the many wives.
Mhm.
So they have a regime that already, there isn't a system that has these men coming into these 9-to-5s and cutthroat capacity that not only these men don't earn right, but their purchasing value don't stretch. In this Nigeria aspect that you said you also stayed in, and even when you talk the Middle East too, I also know what goes on there to some degree. I don't know it all, but I'm saying there is a culture of what's that term I'm looking for, man? Feudalism, right? That allows for control of the wealth of mass wealth from various families and tribes to sit on that. Man, it's not so many. It is a cultural thing, like you're saying, but let's not make it seem like I would say that every other man there is going through this.
No,
you know,
I'm talking specifically about Europe, because what I can tell you is the Middle East, a place like Bahrain, which is very patriarchal society, that you will not see a stay-at-home dad in a place like Bahrain in the Middle East, and not so much in Nigeria either.
So what's going on in
I was going to say
where in Europe?
Whereabouts in Europe?
In Europe, I lived in England.
No, but you said like it's predominantly in Europe.
I couldn't specifically remember.
But he wouldn't be talking. He's talking truth though. What he is saying is beyond just UK though. What are you saying? Like this,
they're more lofty. Like you said,
really
how their
lofty.
lifestyle is way more relaxed. Easygoing in that sense.
But what I wanted to go a little bit back to is something that you guys had mentioned. First of all, the situation, I wouldn't particularly call it like a sort of a cushy situation. Sort of, okay, yeah, my wife, she's the breadwinner. But it's difficult. What I do is very difficult. It's very challenging. And
why wouldn't you call it cushion?
Because, like I said, what I do is, in my opinion, it's even harder than what she does. So it's not as if I'm just, okay, she's paying the majority of the bills and I'm kind of just chilling. Like what I do is very hard work, and it's not remunerated. And again, even like I mentioned before, let's not forget the fact that I do work 2 nights a week. So the last few nights, like, if you want to know a little bit about what my day looks like it involves taking care of my son pretty much the whole day from 8 o'clock in the morning until 7 to 8 at night. And when I say take care of, it means making breakfast, lunch, dinner sometimes, changing all the diapers, giving him a bath, putting him to sleep, amongst other things. And then going to work the 2 nights a week that I work, which is not a lot, I know, but on those days, going to work at 10 o'clock until 3 o'clock in the morning, getting to bed at 4 o'clock and being woken up by your son at 7 o'clock in the morning. So sleeping for 3 hours, rinse and repeat, doing the same thing all over again on 3-4 hours sleep, and then going back to work again at 10 o'clock at night and being woken up by your son at 7 in the morning. And it's exhausting. It's tiring. It's only 2 nights a week, but there's still other stuff that needs to be done. And then also to sort of bring it back to something, earlier you guys mentioned about, the analogy between, let's say you guys saying that this family project has to be a car with a single driver. Who's to say I'm not driving that car? Just because I'm not the major breadwinner, who's to say I'm not leading my family?
And this is one thing that I was having a gripe with, because this is why I say you're an anomaly, because even as I continue to hear you talk, what you're saying, I can gauge you to say you're being sincere about the situation, and it is true.
Mm-hmm.
But the way it's coming across to others, which truthfully, I don't even care too much of, because the more I keep listening to you, I see what you're doing. And I was in a similar situation with my son when I had a couple things going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually commend you as a father to actually give a fuck about your family and your son to such a degree that you're not getting flowers for it. Man, you're a man. Men don't get flowers for anything, right? I think, right? I must get flowers for stuff, right? So, but it is something that, as I observe how you describe, and I clap for it because I know the difficulties of child rearing. And I know that in a world that these women like to naturally be like, where is his father? The father wasn't there. The father wasn't. Here's a father that's there. So he's a father that's there, that he's doing it. Yeah. He's doing it. Yeah. And so when I hear that, I know that from how he's describing it, and because of my own experiences, I know that he's a sincere stand-up individual. And that's the reason why I kind of wanted to have him dissect it a bit more, because if this gets out, which it does, people might be associating that other terminology on that. And then you might have those that might, and he might think he doesn't have a responsibility to the world to that, which as a person that's focusing on his family, he shouldn't really care. Even though this is a podcast, the more I listen to him, the more I have more respect for him. I'm understanding the nuances that I know for a fact most people listening will not understand, right? So he's not getting the accolades. I know he's likely not going to get the accolades from anybody that when he first said, that's why I was asking him, why do you introduce the deepness of what you got going on? Why do you introduce it to the world as a stay-at-home pops? Because that has such a connotation that's negative that already shoots down the nobility, in my view, and the righteousness of a father who's raising his child.
Well,
You see what I'm saying?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Roger. The reason why you're able to say, I'm a stay-at-home dad is because you feel that it's an honorable job.
Exactly.
You're taking care of your son. You're making sure you're cultivating him. You're trying to make him as the best human possible, to live a good life. So in your opinion, you're looking at it, why should I
have to
be embarrassed or
absolutely
I have to explain myself to somebody and feel bad about myself?
Absolutely.
I'm a stay-at-home dad. So I understand that.
Because standards and how society views you too.
View it,
it is. He's checked out. Remember before we were filming, he was saying he's checked out in certain ways. So it really doesn't apply. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't apply to him. And I'm trying to have any male, and not man, but a male that might be thinking, let me give this a try. I'm trying to be like, nigga, don't give this a try. Because he has nuances.
It's the point to inform.
Exactly. He has nuances that make it work. Find you a godly wife. You're not finding that. It's going to be tough for you to find you a godly wife if you don't look like this.
Yeah, that's the thing.
This looks godly. You see what I'm saying? This looks like a respectable
well put together man.
Right?
Exactly.
So, and I don't know if you've always been like that in your wife's journey, whatever the case may be, but that's what I'm saying. The nuances is real. This is like a diamond in the rough in that kind of perspective. Whereas I'm seeing that there's a fundamentally bigger problem that I wanted to that we are touching on it, which is men are dropping out of society. They're checking out of society, and they're checking out of society because of lack of incentive for masculine societies and institutions that would allow them, funny enough, ironically enough, to do the things that these women are claiming aren't being done by X amount of men. My previous boyfriend didn't do this. My previous cat didn't do this. This person didn't do that. So that's why I'm trying to look for what's the better remedy than what Roger's espousing. Which though he's not really espousing, he's just speaking on his circumstance. But I want to kind of understand what is a better remedy. And I think I have an idea, but that's not exactly something I'm going to get into right now. But you see what I'm saying? That's the reason why I was coming from that kind of lens. Because I do recognize how difficult it is to raise children, especially you say you have a son. So who best to raise a son than the father, in my view?
That's true.
Right? So that's true.
I want to talk towards the difficulties of, having your own space at this point. Because now we've established the stay-at-home father part. And of course, you have your own responsibility outside of your family responsibility, because there's one thing to take care of your kid, there's another thing to take care of your wife. Your wife, even because at the end of the day, if your wife is contributing as much as she is, you have to, show that type of gratitude, of course, for her efforts, and you have to put your efforts. You can't just be done at taking care of your child and say, well, I did the child work all day, you're on your own when you come home. Like, I'm not really, I'm just chilling out now. I'm taking it easy. So you still have to, make sure she's good, and of course you're going to have to plan whatever it is you plan out with your wife and your child as well. But you're going to have to include them all together. Sure. And then the one thing I was going to say, though, when it comes to that, and you just, getting back to your own self, back to your own identity, because you're identifying as a father when you're with your child. You're not identifying necessarily, I would say, as Roger, the individual. You're identifying as your child's father. So everything that you're doing is as a father towards your child, to help benefit them, to help nurture them, and do whatever you can to make, every day go by smoothly. But I know something like that may affect the confidence of a person, because you feel like your time is very limited. You feel like, it's harder maybe to get into, side projects, probably, like I said, because of the time restriction. So you have ideas that are probably in your head, and they're bouncing around. They're trying to get out. They're trying to find an outlet. And I think that's the hard part that men would have the biggest challenge is, dealing with their own identity and who they're trying to become. Even though it's with your family, you still have the individualistic side of yourself that, certain things you set out for yourself from years ago,
Absolutely.
before you met your wife, before you had a child.
What
that
is
you
your
wanted to
ambition?
that you want to accomplish. Exactly. So that side of things, that individualism, how do you deal with that? And how do you come back to, being Roger, the person, and going after the things you want out of life that might be connected to your family, but outside of your family in terms of how you have to go get it?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. I mean, it's tough. A lot of, women who generally, do this role of staying at home and raising the kids, like that's something I hear a lot of women complaining about, and obviously some of the men who do the same thing I do. It's hard to find that balance sort of between, your responsibilities at home and your own personal growth, your own personal development. And that's something I struggled with for a while as well, not, being able to have the time to dedicate to a lot of sort of projects I wanted to work on or the things I wanted to do to make myself better. But that's improved with time. It's really just about being able to manage your time in a more efficient manner, being able to make changes here and there to maximize your time. So, for example, I'm going to be starting a course in the next few weeks in data management, because similarly to what we discussed previously, like, in this job market, it's difficult. The opportunities aren't really there. You got to learn how to reinvent yourself. So that's one thing I'm working on. Acting is something that's always been a passion of mine as well. So, a few months ago, I started working again with an agency. I started doing auditions, and there's a lot of stuff you can do from your own home. So, my kid's sleeping, I'm recording an audition tape at home, that kind of stuff. So again, it's just about finding the time to do certain things that, you want to achieve for yourself as well.
Okay. And again, I get that. You said acting. When you say something like that, you know the ramifications of how people receive that? Do you, is what I'm asking?
No, I don't know. I can't speak for everybody else. I don't know how they're going to react.
Say, like, how you think someone's going to listen to that? How you think someone's going to... You don't think that they're going to say, so wait, instead of the 9 to 5, the grit and the grime, the time that you're thinking of trying to find is the acting, like you're trying to act instead of trying to support by having that 2 nights a week become more 8 nights a week, or 7 nights a week, I should say.
Well,
I think because I get what he's onto and I like
Mhm.
it. You see what I'm saying? Like he's definitely economizing when the child, like he's plugging what he can with his time. But
he's also understanding that he doesn't want to basically compete with his wife in terms of who's going to make the most in the financial aspect of the relationship.
have you had any financial skirmishes, hiccups with her?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes we, like any couple, really, we argue about, finances as well.
So what do you take from that when you argue about it? Like, how does that work? How's the resolve? Because we as black men, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, I love you, honey, good night. After that, nah. There is, from my experience, there is it's that elephant is in that room. That's the fattest elephant too. It's in the room, but you just don't see it. And it's there in the next day, second day after.
It lingers.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
for sure.
how does that work in your dynamic? And this is coming from people who usually are doing the 9 to 5s, and yet they had that elephant. So how does that work with your situation? Because she's definitely sounds so poised. I tell you, if you know she came from a certain country, after this, you got to tell me what country she come from, right?
Well, the thing is, I mean, it's hard to say, really. Again, like I said, she sees that I'm ambitious. I mentioned the acting, but I've also worked many 9 to 5s. You mentioned economics as well. I'm also have a degree in economics. I did a bachelor's of commerce with a major in economics. So I've worked in finance before. I've worked in banks in the past. And, if I was to go back to work today, that's where I would be working. So, when I talk about the acting, I mean, that's really just a passion project that I'm giving time right now whilst, I'm staying at home. In all fairness, since I've been a stay-at-home dad for at least 2 years now, I've never stopped applying for jobs. I've been applying, relentlessly for jobs to go back to work so I can contribute financially. Because I think whilst it's been an amazing experience for both myself and my son, me staying at home and raising him, I think our family could definitely benefit from a double income.
Yeah, this
Like,
is what I was. This is what
well,
I was.
If my wife right now makes enough money to support a household, including myself and my son, and paying rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in Toronto, imagine what we could achieve with a double income.
Exactly.
Even me making half of what she makes.
There's a breaking point for your wife, from my understanding, and
No. I wouldn't.
as
say
a
that.
woman, you don't think that there would be a break. Every woman has some level of breaking point where it's like it gets to a place where I don't want to use the term breaking point. Maybe I should say an overwhelming point. Is that perhaps a better thing to say?
No, I don't feel that. I wouldn't
You
say
think your
that.
wife would do all of this forever? With you?
No.
Right? So
No, I don't think she'd do it forever.
Yeah.
I don't think
So
she'd do it
then
forever. But I
that-
think I would break before her. I think my frustrations.
Oh, for sure. I think the man is
Interesting.
going to have a heavy
I know.
burden
A heavy
on his
burden,
back.
Because the thing is, I feel very realized as a father in what I'm doing, but I think I need also professional realizations.
Yeah.
She has that right now.
Can
And
I-
sometimes, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. Actually,
Yeah, finish.
No, sometimes, I think as understanding as my wife is, I don't think she fully understands as well how frustrating the situation could be for me too. And that's why I say again, this is not that cush of a situation, because I deal with a lot of frustration in a sense of, okay, I'm putting my career on hold. When am I going to go back to work? When am I going to have money for us to start thinking about, investing together, buying a house,
putting your so you put your career on hold, or did the circumstance not allow for your career to blossom in the society, in the industry?
the circumstance.
That's what because
The
those are two different
circumstance.
type of things.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Because when you were talking about how your background in commerce, man, I wish you led with that. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, so this is really not a bum.
Yeah, that
You
was
see what I'm saying?
just a lot
Not that I
more.
ever said he was.
Yeah.
You can tell just based off.
That's
how we
what I'm
speak.
saying.
You know what
Yeah.
the thing is he's not trying to prove
Yeah.
anything to anyone.
Yes,
That's
I know.
the thing. I'm
Of
not.
course,
I'm
of
not at all,
course.
man.
Which is commendable
Of
to him,
course.
because that's why he goes with the stay-at-home father,
Yeah.
because that's
Exactly.
something that he deems to be more valuable than
Absolutely.
anything else he could say.
Which I never viewed him. I already see what he is.
yeah,
But because he has that background, the message to those that are,
listen,
because some might have,
They might
you're
misinterpret.
giving confidence, you are exuberating confidence to perhaps those with a bad outcome in terms of thinking,
Bad
where it's like,
intentions, pretty
or maybe good intentions, but they're
good
hearing
intention,
them,
yeah, exactly.
and it's like, this man already has a degree. Like,
yeah,
he's already
not-
established
never found them off the
that
streets.
there's seriously, right? Seriously, we gotta right. So
No, you know it's a funny situation. What this reminds me of. Remember, I don't know if you guys seen that mugshot. There's a mugshot of this guy, and
Yeah, I
he
remember
basically
it.
looked like a
He looks
model.
like a model, yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah,
like it was a very viral mugshot, and all the women were like, "Yeah, like I would take him home with me." Well, the guy actually ended up marrying an heiress. Like,
Oh, really?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
like a,
Oh, wow.
$1 billion or maybe multi-million-dollar woman. And like that's just a funny scenario of a good-looking guy getting the rich woman. He's sitting there,
Wow.
he's
Exactly.
laying there,
And he's
yes, he
chilling.
did like modeling.
He did
and
modeling.
he started
everything,
doing
yeah.
acting.
Oh, yeah.
Hold on, there's a dude with that. He's very light skinned.
Yeah, with the
That's
blue
his
eyes.
Yeah. And he has a great
Yeah.
success story. Great one. I'll tell you straight up.
But again, he has a
That's
great
awesome,
one.
man.
He has a
That's
great one
awesome.
that's one in a trillion.
Yes,
That's not
exactly.
that's,
Yeah.
right. That's a
Oh,
one
yeah,
in
100%.
Exactly,
Whereas-
but that's the connotation that come with it, where he was a criminal, but that was overlooked because of his looks and what have you not. So even with men, even with looks, right? Like looks is a big factor, right?
he
So
has
when-
privilege to.
So when
yeah.
when people see a guy like Roger, good looking
has
guy come
privilege.
around and he says that provides even more shock.
This is what
Yeah.
because now they're kind of judging you off of who you are, like
Absolutely.
how
This
you
is what
look
I'm-
and how
yeah.
you
This is
carry
what I'm
yourself.
saying.
That's
Yeah.
So then
perception,
it's
yeah.
different. If you've seen someone else maybe looking a little different, then you might have a different perspective.
Sure.
right?
Also, like how you're put together as well.
This is what I'm
right?
saying.
So,
He's
Yeah.
holding himself. He's
Yes.
holding himself to not be so bothered by
Yes.
the external noise.
But I
but
think
the
that's what actually irritates women even more.
This is what I was just about to say that.
He's super poised. He's
Yeah,
talking
Look at
about it
look at this
like-
confident man
Yeah.
that takes care of his
Yeah.
family and all this kind of stuff, and he says he stays at home. My husband better not get away. You see what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
ideas, it starts creating.
Sure,
does.
sure.
The nigga might be sitting at home, be like, "All right, I think I'm handsome. I think
I
I'm
could do
poised.
this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yo, darling, I have an idea." You know, so
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting. I think, and this is why I say, like, even what we were talking about earlier, man, in my head, and I don't think I'm delusional to say this, but in my mind, I lead my family. Like, I know that might be, you guys might not understand that concept. Well, but what do you mean? Like, you're not the breadwinner. How do you lead the family? How are you the one driving this car? In my mind, I'm driving this car, man.
I don't think you need to be. First of all, I don't think you need to be the breadwinner to lead your family.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna say.
I
too.
don't think
Yeah.
that needs to be the case. I think that there's many ways to lead your family, and I think a lot of it has to do with the understanding that you and your wife have.
Yes, thank you.
Now,
She's
if you have an understanding, that ship can ride
go as far as it
whether-
needs to go.
Yeah, it needs to go as far as it needs to go, but there has to be that understanding. At the end of the day, even a driver gets tired and then someone else has to drive the
Sure.
vehicle, you know?
Mhm.
So there is gonna be flexibility, like there has to be flexibility, and I truly believe that aspect. But like I said, the scenario you're in is a great one for your situation, and it works perfectly for how you've constructed it, which is not an easy thing to do. It's not
Exactly.
something that, like you said, you never woke up one day and said, well, I want this situation with
Yeah.
my kid, and I want to not work, and I want, like, those weren't the ideas you had. It just was circumstantial.
Sure.
But it ended up, I think, working out where you understand it and accepted it, and you can, take the good from it. But I think you still know that there's much more ahead of me. Like, there's much more ahead for you in
absolutely.
terms of your life and in terms of progression with
Absolutely.
your
This
family. Because
isn't it.
even
This
if you
isn't
have
the end.
multiple kids, even if you have another kid, right? And or multiple kids after that, of course your dynamic is going to have to change, because of course you couldn't be a stay at home because your wife wouldn't be able to support.
No, absolutely. And it's
And we
it's something we talk about as well. We talk about having another kid, and I say straight out, I don't want to do this again.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this
And
again.
we should certainly commend your wife for being there for you and being definitely a supporter in this circumstance, because this storyline can go really, really left.
Even just
very
honoring her
quickly.
vows.
Yeah,
a lot
even
of
that.
women
They don't
honor
even
their
do that.
vows, right?
You're right. That's support. That's supportive kind of.
Be careful now.
Crazy.
Yeah,
That's a-
be
that's a-
careful, get flagged.
This- that supportive element that she brings to the circumstance, that kind of battery, at least the way you're describing it and how I'm hearing it, if every man had one of those, just imagine.
Absolutely.
Just imagine.
Absolutely. No,
Go a long way for sure.
I'm very
Yeah, I
grateful.
guess the biggest story here is, having understanding with the woman. He'd been with his woman for 7 years before you married her, right? So
No, 7 years total. So like we were together like 4 years, and then got married and been married for
Now,
3 years.
when you married her, because you said she's Christian, are you Christian as well, or was that something you're practicing?
No, I'm
So
not.
what are you?
I don't have a religion.
But her Christianity is definitely rubbing off on you to some degree, no?
To some degree. I mean, I'm spiritual. I'm definitely very spiritual. If we were to say about a sort of religion, it would be more closer to the Brazilian religions that are based on Nigerian, based on African sort of spirits. I don't know if you guys have heard. You guys probably wouldn't have
try
heard of
me.
it. Yeah. Do you know the Orishas?
No.
Okay.
Underneath
anyway-
a Yoruba kind of.
Yeah,
right?
they're
Okay,
they're
so
based
there you
on
go.
Nigerians,
Yoruba, exactly. So, that I kind of I lean more towards, but I wouldn't say I have sort of a set religion. I think I obviously have morals and principles like a lot of people have, but it's also to do with the way I was brought up.
Now, how, because obviously your wife, we don't talk about this usually when you're dealing with a woman and stuff like that in different religions, and whether you follow it or your woman follows this and that, and then child, what are they gonna do? So for you, you're a guy that I'm assuming doesn't have no problem with your child growing up as a Christian child.
I don't have a problem with it, but it's something we discussed in quite a bit of detail, my wife and I, in the sense that I said I don't mind if she teaches him a lot of what she believes, but I still would like for him to be exposed to other religions and for him to make his own choice. And that's also based on the fact that I spent most of my childhood living in a Muslim country. That whilst perhaps people in North America might feel a certain way about Islam and a lot of the stereotypes, I don't have that. So I would like very much for my son to be exposed to many different religions and for him to decide.
So that's interesting.
That's very interesting, definitely.
Because especially at the fact that you grew up in an area where, you know, you've watched a lot of people practice the Islamic faith.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever thought at that time period that you may get married to a Muslim woman, or that wasn't a thought in your mind?
That wasn't a thought in my mind. Just because of the fact that I was born in Brazil, and even coming from a mixed cultured household, I still consider myself more Brazilian than anything.
Okay.
And Christianity is the dominant religion in Brazil. So I think that's why I think I always thought I would marry a Brazilian.
Oh.
And my wife, her parents are from Brazil. She's Brazilian, but she's born and raised in Canada. So I don't think at any point I thought specifically, I'd probably marry a Muslim woman. I wasn't against it, obviously, but I really didn't see it.
So you're saying there's still faith out here for men that would like to marry a Canadian woman, because your wife...
I hope that's not what he's saying. That can't be.
Can't be saying that.
No, wait. Because he said his wife was born and raised in Canada, but yet she was able to still follow the faith of her Christianity faith,
Mm-hmm.
and also getting married, and she's true to her vows as of right now. And
Have you seen
hopefully
him?
for the future?
Have you seen him though? So if he's an anomaly,
Exactly.
Yeah,
that woman is also an anomaly too.
Mhm.
Yeah, both.
And
would
then
be
they did some
anomalies,
anomaly
and then
things when they.
It's very anomaly, like
Right,
you said. It's
right.
like,
So
it's like-
just the same way we'll tell
it's
the
the perfect
males.
storm. You could
Yeah,
say.
just the same way we'll tell the
Perfect
males to be that we're listening. Hey, don't think you can pull this off.
Yes,
This is a
exactly.
LeBron
We have
James
to
type
be
of thing.
realistic
We
now.
gotta also say, don't think we can get those type of women,
Yeah.
because
Yes,
he even
exactly.
ended up saying that
Yeah.
he always thought about a Brazilian,
Mhm.
and she. You tell me she's born here, don't stop her from being Brazilian.
No,
You're telling
absolutely.
Both of her parents are Brazilian.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it
Yeah,
kinda
yeah,
still
absolutely. The culture's
still there.
still gonna be for sure.
That even
ingrained
probably
in-
added to why there's a closeness, perhaps, as if she was tremendously Canadian,
Mhm.
Sure.
right?
But I guess in your scenario, what I found interesting is that because you're not maybe a person that believes in her religion to that extent, maybe you believe in certain practices and moral laws and stuff that it entails, but since you didn't actually practice it and you're saying she's truly religious, why wasn't that a big factor for her in terms of you following her faith or converting to her faith?
In some ways it is. I think she just, at this point, she thinks she can't sort of convert me, but she tries. She's tried sort of many times to try and get me sort of to be on board, with her faith as well. But I think, I'm in my 30s now. I'm in my late 30s. I think it's hard to kind of change my belief system at this point.
It's funny, I was in a similar scenario. That's why I wanted to ask about the religious part of things, and maybe being put in a position where you have to go to a church you don't necessarily want to go to, or abide by certain routines of that religion. Obviously, Christians go to church on Sundays typically, and having to deal with that extra part of her religion that maybe doesn't coincide with your lifestyle, but you having to maybe just abide by it because you're in a relationship and you're thinking to yourself, maybe I don't want to cause issues or stir the pot. Maybe I'll just fall in line. But are you a person to just fall in line, or will you just say, I'm not interested in going here?
No, I'd say straight up, I'm not interested. She knows that.
Okay.
Okay.
I think it's about having respect. I respect her culture. I respect, definitely respect what she believes in. But if it's just not for me, it's just not for me. I can't pretend. I've tried before in previous relationships and to go to church. I've been to church quite a few times, but it's not for me.
I hear you. Yeah, man. This
Wow.
dope
This
conversation.
is an amazing conversation. I felt like I learned so much. I didn't do too much talking because I thought it was just super interesting. Right? I was like, wow, that conversation was going through.
Backseat driver today? That's it.
I'll say it in the backseat.
Backseat, man. Only one driver. That's
Only
it. One driver.
Roger's doing the driving
Yeah,
today, buddy.
Only Roger's got the hacks to the
He
wheel
had
today.
the fucking driver's cap on.
That's it. It's a great
Yeah, this is
conversation,
a great
man, about
conversation, for sure.
stay-at-home fathers, masculinity, dealing with marriage and having understanding with your woman or with the man that you're with. I think that's very important in his case. I think that that's the one thing that a lot of relationships lack is understanding between the man and the woman and coming to kind of an agreement to how you're going to raise a family, how you guys are gonna be a union together, following your vows, of course, making sure that you stay within the relationship.
Mhm.
That always is strong. And of course you're gonna have your hiccups, as you said, you have your hiccups, but you understand that your woman is very tied to her religion and she's tied to the relationship as you are as well, and you're not willing to abandon your family and she isn't either. So again, all the best of luck to your marriage and your family, and
Appreciate it.
you
Thank
coming
you.
on the podcast, brother.
Thank you for having me.
And it's a wrap.
Let's go.
Be